Now that we have our camera set up the way that we want, let's go through how to take advantage of some of the great new features built into the camera. The EOS R6 can shoot still images at 20 frames per second with full autofocus tracking. So how do we set the camera up for full speed? Well, the first thing we need to do is make sure that we engage the SERVO AF. This will make sure the camera is ready to shoot moving subjects with focus tracking. To do this, press the Q button and then under the AF operation, we flick across to SERVO. Next, we need to select the drive mode. For full speed continuous shooting, we need to select high speed continuous plus. We now have the camera set up and ready to shoot with the mechanical shutter at up to 12 frames per second. But what if we want to shoot at 20 frames per second and silently? Well, to do this, we need to change over to the electronic shutter, and this is in the main red menu on page 6. Once the electronic shutter is engaged, we're now shooting at 20 frames per second with no shutter speed sound, which is perfect if you're shooting in a situation like a wedding, press conference, or sports like golf where silence really is key. One of the other amazing features of the EOS R6 is autofocus tracking and subject detect. Let's take a look at how we get the camera set up to take advantage of this. First, we need to press the menu button on the back of the camera and go across to the purple AF menu. Make sure that SERVO is selected under the AF operation. This will ensure the camera is ready to shoot moving subjects. Now, under the AF method option, we need to select face and tracking. This will set the camera up to autofocus tracking mode, and it's now ready to track a variety of subjects. Directly below this, we can see there is also an option in the camera to detect either people, animals, or no priority. In scenes that include both animals and people, it's handy to let the camera know which subject is most important to focus on. The last thing we will engage in this menu is Eye Detect AF mode. Perfect for shooting portraits with sharp focus on the subject's eye. Now the camera is set up and ready to shoot with full autofocus tracking. Let's take a look at a few examples of what it can do. The EOS R6 has an amazing 6,072 selectable autofocus point positions. There are a few different options for moving your focus point around when you shoot. First, I'm going to change from AF tracking mode into one of these other AF modes, which allows greater freedom to select the focus point rather than letting the camera take control. I've selected Spot AF, which gives us a nice small AF point for precision. Now I can press the AF point selection button, which activates the AF point so it's ready to be changed. There are 3 ways I can change the position of this point. First, I can scroll with this wheel here, which controls the horizontal placement, and use the rear scroll to control the vertical placement. This is great when you want to quickly move the point over a long distance. If I want to be a little bit more precise, the multi-controller or the AF joystick allows me to move up, down, left and right really quickly. The final option is to use touch and drag AF. Shooting through the viewfinder, I can use my thumb on the main LCD screen to move the AF point. Again, a really quick and precise way to select the AF point. Touch and drag can be enabled from the AF menu, and you can configure which part of the screen works to suit your shooting style. If you want to start shooting 4K movies, the first thing you need to do is switch the camera into movie mode. To do this, we need to rotate the mode dial around to the video icon. Now we're in movie shooting mode, the next thing we need to do is select the record quality. To do this, press the menu button, and under the red first menu page, we'll find the movie record quality options. Under movie record size, the options are listed out for us from 4K to Full HD. Before we get into that, a quick note, in Australia, we use the PAL video format, which is different from NTSC, which is used in other parts of the world. 50 frames per second in PAL is the equivalent to 60 frames per second in the NTSC system. So while standard practice is referred to this spec as 4K 60p, In Australia, we record at 50p. So let's engage 4K 50p. In the same menu, I can also choose between auto exposure or manual exposure. And I can control cropping and sound recording settings as well. Now let's take a look at how we set the camera up to shoot in full 120p for that smooth, cinematic, slow motion footage. Again, in Australia, we use the PAL video format, and 100 frames per second in PAL is equivalent to 120 frames per second in the NTSC system. So whilst it's standard practice to refer to this spec as full 120p, in Australia we record at 100p. Either way, the quarter speed slow motion effect is still the same. Let's get the camera set up. First, we need to change movie recording back to full HD. Now we need to jump back out into the main movie menu recording quality menu. Here we can see the option of high frame rate recording. It's currently disabled, so we need to jump back in here and enable high frame rate recording. One thing to note, and we see it on the screen, is that when the high frame rate recording is enabled, there is no audio recorded. Now we're ready to shoot slow motion clips. Let's take a look at an example. If you're into time-lapse shooting, the R6 has a huge range of options for you. First, it has a built-in interval timer, which means you can set the camera up to take a series of full resolution stills at set intervals, and you can combine these yourself in post-processing to create your own beautiful time-lapse. To do this, first we need to be in stills shooting mode, then press the menu button, and in the red menu, select the 6th tab. Now we need to enable the interval timer and select our intervals and how many shots we want to take. If you want the camera to do the work for you and output the time-lapse video in the camera, the EOS R6 has a range of options for this. To find this mode, we need to jump across into the movie shooting mode. So press the mode button at the top of the camera. Now we're in movie mode, press the menu button and go to tab 5. Enable the time-lapse movie shooting. And you can see there's a huge range of options to select our intervals and how many shots we want to include in the movie record size. We can record time-lapse in 4K or full HD files. In this menu, we can also select whether we want the camera to shoot the time-lapse with a fixed exposure from the first frame, or we can choose the camera to auto expose each frame individually. If you're shooting a time-lapse of a sunset, having an auto exposure of each frame is perfect to show day to night transition. The EOS R6 features a choice of 3 different image file formats: JPEG, HEIF, and RAW. If you want to shoot in the new HEIF file format, which will give you a 10-bit compressed file, you'll need to go into the second menu and select HDR PQ settings. Enable HDR shooting. To choose which format you want to shoot in, you need to navigate the first red menu tab and select image quality. Here we have the option of shooting in either RAW or HEIF or both at the same time. Since we have a dual SD memory, we can also have the option to record either simultaneously on both cards or stills to one card and movie to the second. To do this, you'll need to navigate into the settings menu and select Record Functions, Card Folder Select. In this menu, we have all the options, first being to record stills to one card and video to the other. Down further, we can choose where we want the stills or movie files to be saved and whether we want to have an auto switch between the cards if the memory space runs out. I hope this video has helped you get to know the EOS R6 a little bit more. To get hands-on with the camera, why not check out one of our Canon collective events near you, or pop into your local camera store.